Hey y'all, welcome back to Dixie Cryptid. So glad you clicked on the video. Got 3 Bigfoot encounters for this video I think you're going to like. And then you get to look at chickens and dogs. How about that? How about that? Alright, here we go. This is a story told to me by my mother. In the 1930s, my mother lived with her parents on a ranch in South Texas. The ranch was somewhere between San Antonio and Laredo. There are still hundreds of square miles of mesquite and cactus that cover that area. In the 1930s, this area had a very small human population. There were more cows than people. In those days, they didn't have an indoor plumbing because of the smell, so the outhouse was placed far away from the house. My mother and her sisters and a cousin lived in the ranch house with my grandparents. My mother was around 12 years old at the time. My grandparents had not even heard of TV, and the kids stayed outside all day. And at night, they would play card games, staying up late having fun. One night, after playing their card games, the girls needed to use the bathroom in the outhouse before they went to bed. It was a beautiful, star-filled night with a full moon, and like the saying goes, the stars were nice and bright deep in the heart of Texas. I think there's a song like that, isn't there? They still took a lantern so they could see once they got inside the outhouse. The 4 girls were inside when suddenly the outhouse began to shake. The girls were not scared until they opened the door and saw this big, hairy arm blocking their way out. All they saw was a big, dark arm with long fur. The girls were terrified and began to scream so loud that they scared the creature away. The girls thought they had seen the devil because they had been playing cards all night. When my mother told me the story, she was trying to tell me that she had seen the devil. She knew nothing about Bigfoot. In her mind, she had seen the devil. After she told me the story, I knew she had seen a Bigfoot, not the devil. The next day, she said they checked the area around the house, but the ground was so hard there wasn't any sign left by the creature. Also, there are no bears known to inhabit this area. I'm sorry this story is so short, but that is how my mother told it to me. Sir, short, long, it doesn't matter. These are all fascinating stuff. And you all have heard me say this before, but I love these older nostalgic stories that people have passed down and were being told long before Bigfoot even became an item. Does that make sense? So it really kind of confirms a lot of things to me that people are at least seeing. Okay, I got a hen out here. She must have just laid an egg. I don't know. They love to celebrate after they lay eggs. Anyway, I think it confirms a lot of the sightings that we see today, because people are seeing something all the way back into at least recorded into the 1800s. So anyway, it's fascinating stuff. You wrote it well, and I really appreciate you sending it. The next story is... Okay, this is a good one. This occurred in West Virginia. Late on Saturday, I'd finished working on my 4-wheeler, and I wanted to check it out to see if it was running any better. I had recently put a new light bar on it and had not yet tried it out. My son and I decided to go on some trails about a mile from the house. We have ridden these trails many times, and we were very familiar with them. It was getting pretty dark, twilight, just before dark, and you can see, but it's about to get real dark. We rode about a quarter of a mile from the hard road. I noticed a smell that was like a bunch of hunting hounds mixed with bad BO. My son was leading when I noticed that my son sped up quite a bit. Then he caught movement off to his left. I sped up also to see what it was, and then I saw it. Evidently, my son saw it too. At first, I thought it was a big bear, but it was clearly running on 2 legs. It had long, reddish-brown hair and was very tall. This thing was running beside my son and running over trees and tearing through brush. After almost wrecking several times, we made it out and back to the hard road. We then got home as fast as I could drive. Once we were back at the house, my son asked me if I saw what he saw. I wasn't sure what he thought he had seen, so I asked him about it. He was shaking. He paused a minute, thinking it through, and then said, "I think it was a bear, Dad. I am 50 years old and I have never seen a bear in this country." He asked me, "Dad, what did you see?" And I looked him straight in the eyes and I said, "Son, that was a Bigfoot." He said, "Yeah, that's what I thought it was." I had plans to deer hunt this season in that spot. Those plans are on permanent hold. Thanks for listening, and these events are 100% true. These things are real. And then he signs off. I actually got this story yesterday, and I read it on a live podcast I did on Dark Waters. But it happened just last weekend. So this is September the 29th, 2019. So this happened sometime on the weekend of September the 21st or 22nd. So it's fascinating stuff. West Virginia encounter. I loved it. Thanks for sending it in, sir, and I appreciate you letting me read it on that live broadcast last night. All right, let's go to the next one. This last story is fantastic. I've read it a couple of times, and it's just kind of blows me away. The year was 2003, and I was living in a small town in North Carolina. I lived in a modest brick home in a somewhat secluded area in a heavily wooded area in Iredell County. My closest neighbor was 200 yards away through a small patch of pine trees. Everywhere else was older hardwood trees and 2 cornfields directly across the road from my house. White-tailed deer were abundant, and almost every evening they would come and feed at the edge of the fields. I made it a habit to sit on my porch and watch the deer before dark most evenings. Twice I remember the deer getting spooked and scrambling across the field after hearing an extremely loud sound that I can only describe as part moan and part scream. I remember wondering if mountain lions were in this part of the country. My nearest neighbor was a few years older than me and had a beautiful 100-year-old Victorian-style farmhouse that was situated on 15 acres beside my land. His name was James, and he had recently gotten out of the military around 1999. We were pretty close friends, as I had always taken care of his animals and property when he was away, and he always returned the favor for me when I had to leave town for work. James called on a Saturday afternoon and asked if I wanted to do some target shooting with my new air rifle. I said, of course. Squirrel season was coming up. James had an old barn directly across the road from his house. The barn was approximately 70 yards from his front porch. We hung an old cast iron frying pan from a tree that overhung a four-wheeler trail beside the barn. This was usually used for our .22 rifles, but we thought it might be fun to try air rifles. It was early October, and I walked over to his house at about 5 o'clock that Saturday evening. We took turns shooting at the frying pan, and after dialing in the scope, it proved to be an easy task to make it ring pretty loud with each shot. I had just made it ding 3 times in a row and had the rifle in my lap when we heard it ding again. James looked at me and I looked at him, trying to figure out what was going on. It dinged 3 times and stopped. James took his rifle and shot and dinged it twice. He rested the rifle on his knee and the pan dinged twice. It was starting to get dark and James says someone was messing with us. He went in the house and came back with a huge battery-powered spotlight. He said, "Let's go find out who's in the woods messing with us." We crossed the road and he shined the light into the edge of the woods where the trail started, but we didn't see anything. He yelled out, "Who's there?" And we heard limbs crunching about 20 yards to the right of the trail. He spun the light over where the sound came from, and we both saw eye shine that was impossibly large and at least 7 feet in the air. It was then that we felt a really low, menacing growl that vibrated into our chests. It felt like a jake brake on an 18-wheeler rattling my insides. James looked at me, and we both decided we needed the safety of his porch. The next day, he went to the frying pan and found several smooth rocks on the ground beneath our target that had to have come from the creek that was a quarter-mile down in the woods. I guess Sasquatch liked target practice too. I lived there until 2014, and I never forgot that experience. Only once after the pan incident do I remember hearing a strange, laughing-type howl late one night. It feels good to finally tell my story. I'm sure I'm not the only one in North Carolina who has heard these creatures. Thanks again for letting me get this off my chest. I had hoped it would be forgotten, but I will never forget that growl that shook my bones. Okay, first, what a great story. I mean, these things do the weirdest. They interact with people in the weirdest ways. And I've said this before, and I swear I believe it. I think they have fun with us. I've heard people say, experts, quote, experts say, that we are their entertainment. And I really believe that. And he sees two guys plinking a frying pan out in the woods, and he's like, hey, I'm going to mess with their heads. And he starts hitting the frying pan with rocks. Two things come out of that. Number one, he's having fun with these humans. And number two, these things must be exceptionally good at throwing rocks. I used to be pretty good when I was a kid. I could hit tin cans and stuff like that from 10 yards away, maybe 2 out of 3 times. But these things seem like they never miss. People who are out walking in the woods and you have a rock hitting you in the back, I don't think you should be scared, because they could have hit you in the head if they wanted to. What do y'all think? Alright, that's going to do it for this video. I just wanted to get a quick one up for Sunday. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks a ton. See ya.